So there's something big happening in Morocco right now. For over a week, the streets in its biggest cities have been absolutely shaken by protests, and they're being led by a whole new generation. But here's the thing, this isn't just a local story. Not at all. It's actually part of a global wave of youth uprisings that are rewriting the rules of protest right in front of us. Okay, let's get into what's really fueling this fire.
Dignity before stadiums. This simple, powerful phrase has become the rallying cry for the entire movement. You see it on signs held high in the streets of Rabat, and it just cuts right to the heart of the whole conflict. A generation demanding basic human dignity over some big national spectacle.
So for the past week, we've seen demonstrations just erupting in more than a dozen cities all across Morocco. And what's really interesting is that they're not organized by political parties or unions. Instead, this is all fueled by this simmering anger over what young people see as the government's completely misplaced priorities.
And the central conflict is pretty stark when you look at it. On one hand, Morocco is getting ready to co-host the 2030 FIFA World Cup. We're talking a massive project, billions in spending. On the other hand, you have essential public services, healthcare, education, that are in a state of crisis. It's no wonder so many people are feeling abandoned.
The sheer scale of the investment is just staggering. The government is planning to spend more than $5 billion on infrastructure for this event. That includes building 7 brand new stadiums and completely renovating 7 others. It's this vision of a modern, gleaming Morocco. But for so many people, it's a vision they just can't afford.
So while the country is busy planning for all this future glory, the reality on the ground is grim. There was this recent, absolutely horrific tragedy in the city of Agadir, where 8 women died while giving birth in a public hospital. That became a breaking point. It was this terrible symbol of a healthcare system stretched way too thin, with just 7.7 medical professionals for every 10,000 people.
And so, that's why this question started echoing through the streets. It's not just a chant, it's an accusation. It perfectly captures the frustration of a generation that's watching billions get poured into concrete and steel for a soccer tournament, while the very institutions that are supposed to support their lives and their futures are just left to crumble.
So who is organizing all of this? This isn't your typical movement with traditional leaders or some party headquarters. No, this is something new, something born in the digital world that's now spilling out onto the streets with remarkable speed and coordination.
They call themselves Gen Z 212. Which is a pretty clever nod to Morocco's international phone code. This is a leaderless, anonymous group that uses digital tools to organize everything. And their growth has been absolutely explosive. Their main server on Discord, that chat app that's really popular with gamers, it went from just a few thousand members to over 180,000 in just a few days.
Their method is modern, it's decentralized, and it's incredibly effective. So first, they debate strategy and they plan logistics on secure platforms like Discord. Then, they mobilize their members online using social media. And finally, they take all of that digital energy and they unleash it in real-world protests. This whole structure makes the movement incredibly spontaneous and really hard for authorities to predict or dismantle.
Now let's zoom out for a second, because what's happening in Morocco is not happening in a vacuum. It's a key chapter in a much larger story, a story of a global youth uprising where Gen Z is moving from their screens to the streets, demanding accountability and demanding change.
I mean, just look at this pattern. In Nepal, protests that started over a social media ban quickly spiraled and ended up with the prime minister resigning. In Madagascar, anger over water shortages led to the president dissolving his entire government. And in Peru, a pension reform law has sparked ongoing youth-led demonstrations. The triggers are different, but it's a very similar story of youth-led dissent.
And this brings us to the really crucial question. It's not just one issue or one country. We're seeing a connected global phenomenon. So why now? Why is an entire generation, from Kathmandu all the way to Rabat, feeling the need to rise up? Well, the core idea seems to be that Gen Z feels fundamentally shortchanged. They believe their interests are just not being represented and that they're being handed a world that's riddled with crises they didn't even create. It's this potent cocktail of grievances that is now just boiling over.
And what's in this cocktail of anxieties? Well, young people are facing deepening inequality. They feel like the social contract is broken. They're struggling with soaring living costs and wages that just aren't keeping up. And then you add to that this pervasive anxiety about the climate crisis and a growing sense that their future, the one that was supposed to be full of opportunity, has basically been canceled.
And in Morocco, these feelings are backed up by some hard numbers. Youth unemployment is a staggering 36%. That's nearly 3 times the national average. When you have prospects that bleak, it's really no surprise that a recent survey found that more than half of all young Moroccans have considered leaving the country altogether.
So let's bring our focus back to Morocco and look at where this is all heading. The movement has now formalized its goals, and the government is being forced to respond. But the future? Well, it remains deeply uncertain.
So after being called on to clarify their aims, Gen Z 212 published a formal letter that was addressed directly to King Mohammed VI. Their demands are crystal clear. They want the current government dismissed, they want all detained protesters to be released, and they want a national forum to be created to hold officials accountable for their actions.
The government's response has been really two-sided. On one hand, there's been a harsh crackdown, with hundreds of arrests, widespread injuries, and reports of police even opening fire on protesters, killing at least 3. But on the other hand, officials have opened the door to dialogue, promising to listen and to improve the very services, like hospitals, that sparked all this outrage in the first place.
But the protesters are deeply skeptical. They're dismissing these promises as just patchwork measures. And why? Well, because they've watched stadiums for the World Cup go up in a matter of months, while promises of social reform and better hospitals are things that they're told will take years, if they ever happen at all.
And this leaves us with a final, really critical question. This new form of protest, it's leaderless, it's digitally organized, it's globally connected, it's a powerful force. It can mobilize thousands overnight and challenge the authority of the state in ways we just haven't seen before. So as this generation rewrites the rules, you have to wonder, are governments anywhere truly prepared for what comes next?